When I was 12 years old, I wrote my first lines of software code in QBasic. Mastering the skill of being able to build things inside of the computer, manifesting whatever dream I could create, was so fun to me that from then on, programming has become both a personal and professional enjoyment. But even for someone as driven as me when it comes to writing software, coding has its frustrations. The thing that often gets in the way of the rewarding aspects of programming is that nowadays, getting anything done requires so much depth of knowledge, and that knowledge gets outdated so rapidly that doing even a simple task becomes a time-consuming ordeal. Take this simple website I'm working on for my local area for an example. Initially, my goal is to start out with a few simple pages of information and a sign-up form. Starting a simple project like this presents you with a few engineering decisions to make off the bat. For example, what technology should I use? Should I use a canned CMS system like WordPress? Or should I build from scratch using my tool of choice, Ruby on Rails? If I choose Rails, should I use the more traditional means of rendering the web pages using the templating system provided by Rails? Or should I take the more trendy path and just use Rails to send data to a JavaScript-powered frontend like React? Speaking of which, a fresh Ruby on Rails application has gotten a lot more difficult to get up and running over the past few years, thanks to advancements in the world of JavaScript. ES6 and front-end frameworks like React, Vue, and Angular are the trendy thing to do. They enable you to build a more capable front-end for a richer end-user experience in the web browser, but they come at a cost of being more difficult to maintain because now you have to manage the knowledge and deployment skill for two complex software packages, each of which can easily become a full-time job. Because I didn't feel like dealing with a second framework for an application with a few simple forms, I just decided to stick with the plain Rails version 6, using slim templates and jQuery if needed. Rails 6 is fairly new, and I haven't built any projects with it yet. Most of my more recent projects have been on Rails 5. The biggest change in the last two editions of Rails is that the asset pipeline has been replaced with a tool called Webpacker. This complicates the way style sheets and JavaScript is integrated into your web application, but provides the advantage of allowing you to easily use more modern front-end packages through Node or Yarn. It's not so bad once you learn the hang of it, and I'm working on a separate video for that topic. So the first mistake I made in getting this website up and running was failing to run the Webpacker compile step in my deploy script. This caused my styles to not be found on my initial production run. So I fixed that, and then next I discovered what appeared to be a bug in the production compiled version of the Webpack styling assets. A box where I set the opacity to 75% in development was not displaying at all in production because for some reason that opacity setting was getting overwritten by something else that I couldn't find. I had to get around the issue just by avoiding the use of opacity. Once I finally got the styling issues figured out, then I found out that my web form wasn't working. This was a tricky one. I had to dig into the server logs only to find a cryptic error message. After about 2 hours of research, I learned that this was caused by the cross-site forgery token in my Rails app not getting along with the reverse proxy on my site. I had to add some forwarding settings inside of my Nginx configuration to make it work. I finally got my simple web page working, and this was just the beginning, but it was exhausting to get here. There's still a lot more I'd like to add. I'm thinking about adding a tool like Refinery to make it easier for me to administer pages on the site and upload static files. And I'm also not happy with the way Capistrano works in the deploy setup because its folder structure doesn't play very well with Docker containers, and I had to make a few workarounds for that, which are kind of hacky. So to sum up what I'm saying is that I still love writing software code, but I feel like the industry is evolving at such a fast pace that there are diminishing returns. Much of a software engineer's day can now be spent figuring out how to navigate bugs, deprecations of old code introduced by new packages, and new features being introduced. It takes a lot of effort to get all of the different frameworks you're using to talk to each other, and sometimes you find quirks that get in the way of the code you're trying to write. So how do I deal with this mentally so that I don't get burned out as a developer? Well, for one, I practice a lot. Whenever I'm doing a hobby project like this, it's the journey that matters. I like using hobby or side projects as opportunities to explore new platforms, figure out their quirks, and very often gain some knowledge that I later apply in a more professional setting. I also think having realistic expectations of yourself is important. Realize that the frustrations of dealing with software that doesn't work the way you want it to is just part of the game. At the end of the day, you might have to balance the urgency of meeting your end goal versus the technology you might be preferred in deploying. Maybe it will be more effective for a site like this if I just started out with a Google form. But what was important to me was not only getting the site up and running, but getting it up and running the way I want to do it. And finally, cutting corners might be necessary for the sake of just getting things done. When you're an enterprise developer, there's a high expectation for writing regression tests and writing your code in a very clean way that another team can understand. But when you're just doing a personal project or you're doing a startup project, those goals may be secondary. It might be worthwhile to sacrifice a little bit of testing coverage in order to get your minimal viable product out and ready to go. So writing software code can be fun, but I find it to be really frustrating dealing with the hassles of just getting your software packages to work. And sometimes you're writing great code, you want to get really deep into the business logic, but sometimes they're slowed down by all of the third-party software that you're trying to manage. But once you get your site up and running, it's well worth it.